All right, welcome all. Okay, the time is 1:01 per my clock, so I'm gonna get this ball rolling. Welcome, OLLI folks. Good to see all of you again. Thanks for joining. Today we're gonna be talking about the Police Bureau. And we have Chief Ty O'Mara and we have Lieutenant Vaughn Stewart with us today with some PowerPoint slides. And so just to start off easy, I'm gonna pass the mic over to the chief to introduce himself. And a reminder to folks, they'll run through some slides. As questions come for you, feel free to put them in the chat or write them down and we'll go for questions at the end. We do post videos of these sessions at the end, but just of the presentation portion. We're not putting up the question portions just in case folks have questions that they're not comfortable asking and having put up on YouTube. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Ty. Take the spotlight.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here with you. Always fun to join an OLLI class or any community group and try to get to know one another a little bit. Stand by while I share. Sharing is caring, as they say down at the Elks Lodge. Can people see the PowerPoint or no?
I can see it.
Okay, very good. All right, we're off to the races. All right, my name's Ty O'Mara. I'm the police chief. Here's some overview reminders that you probably see with every one of these sessions. Have your video on, have the mic off. Tech difficulties, there's a number to call, 552-2103, and feel free to chat in the chat room there off to the side. Anne's already been doing some chatting, and I think she's predicting some interesting conversation going on because she said something about not wanting it posted to the city's website. So we're going to talk about the police department. We're not going to talk about every aspect of the police department, but I'm happy to. There's just only so much that I thought to cover and Bond thought to cover. So if somebody wants to know something that we didn't think to share, please don't hesitate to ask the question. Welcome to your police department. My name's Ty. I am from Detroit, Michigan. I went to Hillsdale College. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology there. Hillsdale has with some people, Hillsdale has a very interesting reputation. I'll say that the thing that I like about Hillsdale is that it was a very high quality education, and the political stuff, I'll just leave that off to the side because that's not exactly who I am, but I certainly did enjoy my education there. After I got to Ashland, I got a master's in management degree from SOU, and I've been to several advanced police schools like the Police Executive Research Forum, Senior Management Institute for Police, and some other ones. I've been a police officer for almost 33 years now, and almost 15 years in Ashland, and coming up on 10 years. And that pretty little thing down in the right corner is Emma the dog, who I'm fortunate enough to have in my life. And if you live in the Oak Knoll neighborhood, you might see me walking around her on a pretty regular basis. The police department is broken up into 3 divisions: administration, operations, and support. Administration is the part that I'm in, and it's only me and one other person. The other person is a senior administrative analyst, Lynn Merrifield. Lynn is really the boss of the police department. She just lets me do some play acting from time to time. She runs the budget. She is integral in the onboarding process. One of the biggest things that she does is it's a constant process, but she has to prove it every 3 years. That's our accreditation. We are an accredited agency through the Northwest Accreditation Alliance, and we have been so for probably about 20 plus years. And I am on the board of the Northwest Accreditation Alliance. We're going to talk about each one of these divisions in a little bit greater depth, but just the overview is there's admin, Operations is the biggest chunk of the police department. That's the men and women that you see out in uniform every day. And then support, which is headed up by Bon Stewart, who's here with us today, is records, the criminal investigations division, our school resource officer, our volunteer program, and our crime analyst, and our property and evidence technician. And I might be forgetting something there, but we'll figure it out as we go along. One of the biggest pieces of my division, the administration division, is budgeting. And of course, I'm also in charge of hiring and the inevitable, unfortunate firing and the department accreditation, like I said before. The police department has an annual budget of approximately $9.3 million. And that's a lot of your money. I'm very respectful of the fact that that's a lot of your money. And that there's no denying it. One thing that I'd like to keep in mind is that 77% of that is personnel costs. And I don't know if the other department heads are getting into the breakdown of budget like that, but that really is where the bulk of our cost is. It's the most, for the police department anyway, it's by far the most costly thing. Contracts, in our case, things like Emergency Communications of Southern Oregon and Axon, both of which we'll get into a little bit later on, take up another 7%. So that only leaves 16% of that 9.3 million that's available for buying equipment, going to training, participating in, new policy making. We like to be very creative and push new progressive policies here. All of that stuff gets crammed into that other 16%. So yeah, the 9.3 million is a lot, but keep in mind that 84% of that is already dedicated before we buy one uniform, before we put a single gallon of gas into a police car or buy a police badge or anything. That's out the door. Did you know that there is no dispatch center for the city of Ashland? And a lot of people get caught up on this, and frankly, a lot of people get upset about this. There's only one PSAP, and I'll explain what that is in a second, in Jackson County. A PSAP is a public safety answering point. No matter where you are in Jackson County, if you call 911, there's only one place that it goes to, and that's Emergency Communications of Southern Oregon. This is a consolidated dispatch center that serves every emergency service in the county except the state police. The state police have their own dispatch center. But if you're on I-5 and you call 911, it still goes to Emergency Communications of Southern Oregon. And then once they figure out that you've got an issue on I-5 or on another state highway, they will transfer you to the state police. So every police department, every fire department, every medical call originates with Emergency Communications of Southern Oregon. Even if you call the Ashland Police Department right now, call the business number and request police service. At first, when you call us, one of the record specialists up front will answer the phone and will say Ashland Police Department. But then as soon as it becomes clear that you're going to request police service, you're going to get transferred to dispatch, which is up in, you could say it's in Central Point or say it's in Medford. It's like basically on airport property at the northwest corner, kind of across the street from the new Costco. And that's a point of confusion for some people, and sometimes they get upset. They say that they want to talk to an Ashland police dispatcher. Well, there's really no such thing as an Ashland police dispatcher. Everybody gets serviced by Emergency Communications of Southern Oregon. All right, let's jump into the support division. Bon Stewart is our support division lieutenant. He's in the meeting with us today. Bon has lived here for, it looks like 30 years. 32 years. He started working here. I
32
can make
years,
up,
your math is good.
all right. I was gonna say, I can make up anything that I want because I didn't think Bon was gonna say anything, so I could start telling tales about him. He's been here since 1998, working for the police department. He started as a 911 dispatcher when we did in fact have 911 dispatchers here inside the city before all the consolidation happened. He has worked as a patrol officer, detective, school resource officer, training officer, officer in charge, defensive tactics, physical fitness instructor, less than lethal munitions instructor, and use of force. He really is a valuable teammate. When I tried to come here in 2010, the chief of police then, he put me on a ride along with Bon Stewart, who was an officer at the time, and he was very clear that he said, Ty, I'm not going to hire you if Bon Stewart wants the job that you are applying for, because Bon would do a really good job with it. And in that moment, Bon did not want that particular job. Eventually, I'm glad he stepped up and promoted up, and he's a fantastic, valuable member of the leadership team. One of the things that Bon really excels at is teaching community groups about the best way to respond to active shooter situations. And I also understand that he teaches a class on the philosophy of poker or something like that, actually in OLLI, if you're interested. So he oversees our support division. One of the biggest pieces of that is the record specialists. We have 4 full-time record specialists. They're the people, if you come into the police department, they would greet you at the front counter and help you out any way that they can. They process 3,000 to 4,000 reports, police reports every year, and there's a lot to processing a police report. There's state and federal reporting, there's use of force reporting, there's databases that need to be updated and maintained. One of the most burdensome things that they do is also process report requests. This can be from insurance companies, other police agencies. There's an assumption that since we are a public entity, and this is true for the entire city, it's true for all public entities, if we possess something, there's an assumption that it belongs to you, that it's public information. And unless we have a reason to restrict access to that, we have to release it. And as a police department, there's often a reason why we can't allow access to it if it's an open investigation, or there's some very specific laws around releasing body cam recordings. But in general, if we have it, it belongs to you. And if you make the right request, we got to give it to you. And the record specialists are the ones that facilitate all that. They also handle registering sex offenders as required by law, fingerprinting, which can be because you've been convicted of something in Ashland Municipal Court. It can also be because you're getting a new job and your new job requires you to be fingerprinted. So come in here and we'll fingerprint you and help facilitate you getting that new job, hopefully. One of the other big things that they handle, especially as the drug possession laws are kind of in flux coming out of the state legislature. For example, a few years ago, I don't know if it was Governor Kotek or Governor Brown, but there was an executive order that all simple possession of marijuana cases had to be expunged. And so that's a whole bunch of digging into past records and making sure that nobody's getting tagged for something that they shouldn't be tagged for. And we certainly want to be good partners in that. We want to be adherent to the law. And I am all in favor of people getting expungements. If they've moved on to a better part in their life, that shouldn't follow them around. One of the most interesting and unfortunate parts about being a record specialist is that the people that come into the lobby of a police department can be very irate, can sometimes be in mental health crisis or substance abuse crisis. And it really does take a special kind of team member to navigate those situations in a professional yet firm manner. So we're very grateful that we have the team up there that we do have. One of the other parts of the support division is the criminal investigations division. These are the detectives that we have. We've got 1 detective sergeant and 2 detectives. They investigate major felonies. They participate in the MADU group, and MADU stands for Major Assault Death Investigation Unit. It's one of the, I think, coolest parts of Jackson County law enforcement that if there's a homicide or a major assault, or let's not even say a homicide, let's say a questionable death, a page will go out to detectives, every detective in the county. So that's detectives from the Ashland Police Department, the Medford Police, Central Point, the Sheriff's Department, and the State Police. Those are all the agencies that have assigned detectives. And it says, that page says, the Ashland Police Department is investigating a homicide that happened. You know, this is the rally point, meet at APD. And if you're available, you come and you work that case. So we get the benefit of having Medford detectives, county detectives, state police detectives, Central Point, and even sometimes federal agents responding and helping us with our homicide investigations. And the turnaround on that is that if you're a detective here, you're going to get activated and work a Medford homicide or a Central Point or Eagle Point or really anywhere in the county. So it's a great partnership, and our detectives actively participate in that.
Patty, can I add something?
Yeah, please.
So the Alameda fire was an overwhelming investigation. And that was a Ashland Police Department investigation because that fire started within the city of Ashland. So we did a MADU call out request for detectives, and we had like 40 detectives show up the next morning to help us. So that's what it's for.
Thank you. That's a great point. I see a chat. I just opened up the chat box, but somebody asked what pot of money pays for the regional dispatch center. There are user fees that are dependent on the size of the agency. The Ashland Police Department's annual user fee, this just got approved at council on Tuesday, is about $520,000 a year. The fire department is about $250,000 a year. The county and the Medford Police have the biggest chunks. The sheriff's office pays over $1 million a year, as does the City of Medford Police Department. And then the scaling on that goes all the way in the other direction, that a user agency like Southern Oregon University Campus Public Safety has a very nominal fee, like $9,000 or $15,000 a year. So that's the current model, and that might change. There are some things that are being explored at the county level for how to fund ECSO long-term. I'm fortunate to have a relatively permanent seat on the board of directors, along with the sheriff, the Medford Police Chief, the Medford Fire Chief, the Fire District 3 Chief, and I all have kind of permanent seats. And then there are some other agencies that get appointed, but I'm glad that I can have a hand in that, the management of ECSO.
And Ty,
And
jump in real quick.
yeah,
Quick clarification. So that ECSO comes out of the contract portion of that
Yes.
slide that Ty
Thank you.
showed. The majority of our contract fees go to those 911 services. And Ty, don't worry, I'll keep an eye on the questions in the chat, and I'll make sure we get to all of them after the slides are shown.
okay, you got it. Thank you, Jordan. The detectives also do background investigations. The background investigation is if we're trying to hire somebody as a police officer. The background investigation is exhaustive and intrusive, as it should be, because we want to make sure that we're hiring the right people. And our detectives do a great job of that. And they also handle confidential investigations. We have, which I'll get into more a little bit later on, but we've got a very forward-thinking sex assault investigation policy and program here. And that's an example of a confidential investigation that they might handle. And they handle about 250 cases per year between the three of them. But you got to keep in mind that their cases are cases that are very prolonged and drag out for a long time. So that is actually a pretty significant caseload. And my go forward button stopped. Another part of the support division is a crime analyst. Amanda maintains crime statistics. She interfaces with other agencies. If we have a big event coming up like the 4th of July, she would be the person that kind of keeps her ear to the ground and senses if there are any impending threats to the 4th of July. She works with other agencies, intel analysts as well. And she's the go-to person for Clery reports. And Clery reports are disclosures that every college and university in the country must make to be transparent about crime stats in and around campus. And so SOU, every year they have to prepare a Clery report, which spells out the nature and frequency of crime on any property, on any campus property or streets adjacent to campus properties. But it's not just SOU, because you know, the University of Oregon might have a team that comes down here, or some group of students that comes down here for a week. And so now Amanda has to do a Clery report for the University of Oregon. And I recall about a month ago, a university in Florida reached out for something. So this is really a national level thing, where of the hundreds, thousands of colleges and universities there are around the country, any one of them could reach out to Amanda and say, I need crime data because some of our students visited there, and we accommodate getting that to them. We've got a evidence and property technician, Heather. She maintains the secure evidence, including drugs and narcotics. She interfaces with the Oregon State Police Crime Lab, disposes of evidence as attention rules allow. We've got, as some of you might know, a prescription drop-off box in the lobby of the police station, and she's the one that manages that. And she also will respond to crime scenes and collect evidence like you might see on CSI or something like that. One of the most important things that she does, along with Bon, and this works toward our accreditation that I mentioned earlier, is there are audits that have to be done to make sure that a piece of evidence is where it's supposed to be. If we say that we have a baggie of methamphetamine and it's in box number 123, then it needs to be audited, and we need to verify that we've got a baggie of methamphetamine and it's exactly where it's supposed to be. And these are both planned audits and surprise audits that keep us compliant with the standards of the Northwest Accreditation Alliance, so that we can, rightfully so, boast that we are an accredited agency. Bon is also responsible for managing our volunteers and police service. This is a group of mostly, but not exclusively, but mostly senior members of the community who are retired and want to volunteer. And they do things like inter-office mail delivery. They'll take stuff up and down 99, Highway 99 to the DA's office. And the reason I say that is because they'll call the Talent Police and say, do you have a pickup for me? Or the Phoenix Police, and then our volunteer will stop and facilitate, you know, physical document communication between the DA's office, Phoenix PD, Talent PD, and the Ashland Police Department. They also do vacation home checks. If any of you are going on vacation and you want somebody to keep an eye on your house and walk around the perimeter a few times a week, all you have to do is phone into the police department and say, I live at 123 Oak Knoll Drive. I'm going to be gone until next week. My house is locked up tight. Could you just send somebody to walk around it from time to time? And they will do that on a voluntary basis. It doesn't cost anything. If they find something amiss, they'll get on the radio and call a police officer in to investigate it and then notify you accordingly. You may have heard that we recently got back into the school resource officer program after being out of it for a while. Bon, having been a school resource officer, is in charge of that. The program is going really well, and everybody's excited, both on our side and on the high school and Ashland School District side, that we have re-engaged with that program.
Also, the school district is already like clamoring for a second officer because they're so excited to have the first one.
Yep, it's great. Deputy Chief Dan Mullen is not with us today because he's off to training, but he's in charge of our operations. Dan is a Rogue Valley native. He started off as a firefighter, unfortunately. And the reason I say it that way is there's a natural competition or friendly animosity between police officers and firefighters. So I have to get in firefighting or firefighter digs every time I can. But he started off in the fire EMS side. He also was a 911 dispatcher. He's done the field training, the detective work, the mid-level management instructor, you know, just like Bond, he's got a lot of credentials under his belt. He's got an associate's degree in criminal justice, and he's working on his bachelor's degree. And he's on the steering committee for the Jackson County Coalition Against Trafficking Task Force. So he's another great member of our team. Operations is the backbone of the police department. It's the patrol function. It's the biggest, most immediately important thing that we have. There's a lot of stuff that, including me, including Bond, including Dan, and records and detectives and everybody, that we could go dark and silent for a few days or a few weeks or whatever, and nobody would notice. But if you lose patrol officers driving around in marked police cars and answering 911 calls, even for a few hours or for a day, you'll definitely notice that. This is the core function of the police department, emergency response. Somebody in uniform showing up on your front porch when you call 911 and you say that you need some help. Of course, it's a 24/7 operation, both for emergency and non-emergency responses. Last year, the Ashland Police Department handled more than 32,000 calls for service. That's almost 90 times a day. Somebody calls into dispatch one way or another and says, I need something from an Ashland police officer. That something might take the officer 30 seconds to accomplish, and it might take them the entire shift to accomplish, but that's almost 90 requests a day for an officer's attention. The patrol teams are divided, or the patrol officers are divided into 4 shifts. There are 2 day shifts, team 1 and team 2. Team 1 works Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Tuesday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And team 2 works Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and every other Tuesday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then there's 2 teams, team 3 and 4, that are corresponding on the midnight hours. So 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., the 2 teams working opposite parts of the week. So the vast majority of the officers work a 12-hour shift, which means that they get either 3 or 4 days off a week, which is how the hours add up. And that gives them 80 hours a week. We've got 31 sworn slots that are authorized by council and by budget. If you take away me, Bond, Dan, you take away the traffic officer that rides around on the motorcycle, Steve McLennan, that handles all of our large scale events. You take away the school resource officer, you take away the concentrated area patrol officers that are assigned specific patrol areas downtown and out by exit 14. And you take away the detectives that are handling the long-term major felony investigations, that number gets cut in half. And so you end up with about 16 people. And when you look at the fact that you need a supervisor, a sergeant, to lead each of those 4 patrol teams, that takes us down to 12 people to staff the teams, 4 teams, 3 officers on each team. So the staffing on each team is a supervisor and 3 officers. This is in flux a little bit, but that is, as a foundational rule, the staffing at any given time. Now, right now, at this moment, you have, if something were to happen, you have Bon and I are here, and I think there's 3 detectives back there, and there's some concentrated area patrol people. Traffic officer Steve doesn't seem to be here today, but so really there's more like 8 sworn officers on duty, but only a supervisor and 2 or 3 are actually assigned to patrol. And that's our minimum staffing. And we're going to get into a little bit deeper dive on the staffing in a little while, but any time of day or night, that is the staffing that we're allowed to put out, that we are able to put out there as a supervisor and up to 3 officers to respond to calls for service. The goals of the operation department is constantly to maintain adequate staffing. And just as a side note, like a lot of businesses, law enforcement saw a mass exited in 2020 and 2021 between the social reform protests that we saw and COVID. Of course, lots of people decided that they wanted to move away from the workspace entirely, and police work, saw a mass exodus. So we've been trying to build back up, and it's a ongoing struggle. We're a lot better positioned than we were a few years ago, but we're still trying to play catch up. And we always want low response time. If you call 911 and say, I need somebody here now, we want to get there as quickly as we can, do so safely. So we want low response time, and we want a high clearance rate. Last year, for our violent crime, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, we had a 69% clearance rate by national standards. That is exceptionally high, so I'm very proud of that. To get into the staffing a little bit more, in 2017, we did a staffing report, and what we looked at was the amount of staffing that the Ashland Police Department has historically had for the 20 years. Again, we did this in 2017, so the 20 years leading up to that. Now we're looking at more like 27 years. The Ashland Police Department was always at 28 sworn officer positions. Now we're at 31, but that's our authorized strength. Our real strength right now is like 27. Again, we're trying to get back up. So leading up to 2017, for the previous 20 to 25 years, our staffing had been 28 throughout. Even though between, what would that be, 1997, the mid-90s, leading up to 2017, the population of Ashland had gone from 15,000 and change to 21,000 and change. And I know that the SOU student population is a little bit down right now, but it had gone from, from here up to here. And tourism had gone through the roof. I remember in 2017, there were like, the estimate was like 320,000 people came through here as tourists. And yet the police staffing had stayed the same. And so we started to look at whether or not we needed to grow the police staffing. And there are a few different methods of doing this. In a very basic way, you can say that some methods are quantitative and some are qualitative. And the quantitative methods say that you should have X number of police officers for every 1,000 residents. At the time in 2017, we had 1.2 police officers for every 1,000 residents. The national average for cities our size, the national average was 2.0 police officers for every 1,000, and we are at 1.2. And if you, and then the national average across the board, regardless of size, was 1.8. So we're at the very low end of that quantitative metric. And I think that is one clear example that we were right to try to get our numbers back up. The qualitative side of staffing models says, don't look at how many residents you have and try to say, have this many police officers for this many people. Instead, look at how you want to accomplish your job, how you want your police officers to behave, how you want them to engage with the community. And at that time, we were seeing that our numbers for cases handled and calls for service were just going up, up, up. And we were participating and continue to participate in programs that encourage all interactions to slow down, to not rush in and make a decision. One of the things that we very much try to engage in is something called procedural justice, which simply says that regardless of a person's role in a event, they should be respected, they should be given their voice, they should be heard, they should be given neutrality in decision making, and their dignity as a human being should not be challenged. And if you can successfully engage everybody even in a tumultuous situation in that way, because you slow the encounter down, you make sure everybody feels listened to and validated, even if you don't agree with their perspective, validate their perspective. When it comes time to say, turn around, put your hands behind your back, you're going to jail, they're much more likely to do it if they feel like they've been treated respectfully. So with the numbers, the population numbers all going up, 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 and our numbers staying the same, but we want to slow everything down and really have meaningful relationships throughout the community, we simply can't do it. And they're leading up to us going to council and making this argument. There were a lot of situations, again, with the supervisor and 3 officers assigned to a team, and let's imagine it's one of the midnight teams, a supervisor or soup, if I say soup, I mean supervisor, a soup and 3 assigned. Very often one of those 3 is off on vacation, training, sick. So really the minimum staffing is a soup and 2. So that's 3 people in uniform patrolling the streets of the city of Ashland at any time of day or night. And what we had several examples of in the months leading up to taking this to council to make this case, that 2 of those 3 officers on duty, the uniformed officers on duty, one would be at the jail, let's say, and one would be taking somebody to the detox center, to the hospital. And so what you're left with in a town of 21,000 residents, 2,000 hotel rooms, thousands of college students, you're left with one person wearing a police uniform that's available to respond to 911 calls. Now, obviously, that's not a workable solution. If a police officer is going to go to a tumultuous call, there's a rule that for every one bad person there needs to be at least 2 police officers. So that one lone police officer is going to have to call in somebody from another agency to assist. And we have excellent partnerships with Talent, Phoenix, State Police, County, everybody. We've got great partnerships, but they also have their own municipalities and communities that they are responsible for. So we can't just assume that they're going to be available. So one police officer trying to hold down a town of 21,000 plus all of the extras on top of that. And there is one situation where, and just to go back for a second, if we make believe that those other two police officers aren't gone somewhere else, let's say all 3 of the uniformed police officers are on duty and available in the city of Ashland, because we have to have a bad person outmatched 2 to 1, if there's 3 officers on duty, that means they can still only handle one situation at a time. And what we found in like the week leading up to that conversation in 2017, that there was at least one incident where all 3 of the Ashland police officers were obligated to a very volatile situation, and we had to call in a Talent officer and a Phoenix officer to come hold down a second volatile situation for 40 or 45 minutes until an Ashland officer could break free. And that's not the service that the people in this community deserve. They deserve to have an Ashland, and this is not a shot at Talon or Phoenix, because they're both great police departments and great partnerships. But when somebody in Ashland calls 911, they deserve to have an Ashland police officer show up on their doorstep and address their concerns in the way that they have been taught to do so by Ashland standards. So our staffing was bumped up to 2,000 or to 31. And then we had a mass exodus, and in 2021, maybe early 22, but really 2021, when we're supposed to have 31 police officers, we were operationally at 19 for a little while. And it was all we could do to just keep the patrol function chugging along. All right, I'm going to show you this map, but I want to be very clear that these are not, you see how important it is, because I wrote not in red letters. These are not evacuation zones. Before evacuation zones, which are very, very important, came along, the police department came up with customer service zones, basically, that if you live in, zone, the upper left quadrant of the city, then you know that Sergeant Hall is your person. You have a problem, your community reach out person is Sergeant Hall. If you live out by shopping cart and buy mart like I do, then your go-to person is Sergeant Leonard. It was a community engagement tool. And as of today, as we were putting this together, we realized that we really need to get away from this being numbered, because we do want everybody to know their evacuation zones. And so we're going to redo this with A, B, C, D, E, and we'll launch that as soon as we have it ready. So forget about the numbers. They're not evacuation zones, they're customer service zones. And wherever you are in the city, you do have somebody specific that you can reach out and engage with for any problems that come up. All right. Yeah. Every year I go to council in around May or June, and I present, it used to be the annual use of force report, but now it's so much more than that. I report on crime statistics and uses of force and lots of stuff, but these are the Part 1 crimes. And Part 1 crimes, technically they're not even called Part 1 crimes anymore, but I still call them that because that's the way they've been presented to council for a long time. But they're crimes like rape, robbery, homicide, aggravated assault, larceny, auto theft, larceny, and a couple of other ones. It's not littering. It's not driving on a suspended license. It's stuff that across the board nationally, the FBI has said every police department is going to specifically track these crimes and report it to the FBI every year, so that on a national level, we can speak the same language. They're not called Part 1 crimes anymore, but I still use that because that's how we've always done it. 2017, in a lot of ways, was the year of spiking statistics. It was our worst year downtown, and it was the unfortunate high point of Part 1 crimes. But since then, we've come down to less than 50% of what we used to have. Of those Part 1 crimes, violent crimes, it's kind of self-evident, but that's rape, robbery, homicide, and aggravated assault. There were 29 of them reported to Ashland last year. And again, our clearance rate is 69%, which is very, very good. I'm very proud of the men and women that work here and the work that they do every day. For crime mapping, there's a new tool that was launched by our partners at the Medford Police Department. And just as all agencies in Jackson County participate in the same dispatch center, Emergency Communications of Southern Oregon, the Medford Police maintains a records management system that we all participate in, and we all pay some level of financial support to, even though it's pretty nominal. So we all use the same database. We can all be informed by the same information. And they recently launched a public-facing crime mapping platform called GeoShield. If you want to write down that address, it's geoshieldcommunities.com. And you can zoom into Ashland or Medford Central Point, really anywhere. And you can say, I want to know all the crime that's been reported in the last 2 weeks or the last month or whatever. I'm only interested in this kind of crime. And it's a neat tool. It's relatively new. You are amongst the first to be told about it. So please enjoy it. I wanted to get into a little bit of the technology that the police department uses. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this stuff is I really want to highlight how we try to be as transparent as possible. And you might wonder, two of these images are not connected, but four of these images are connected. The upper left image is of a dash camera. The upper middle image is a body camera. The upper right image is a gun holster, but the functional part of that, or the part that I want you to notice, is that you see at the bottom of the holster toward the front, a little bit off to the side, to the right, is a piece of plastic that's mounted on there, and that's a sensor. And then below that is what's commonly called a taser. Technically, it's called a conducted energy weapon. And the reason that I wanted to highlight this is because all of these things are connected to each other. They're all manufactured by the same company. The company's called Axon. It used to be called Taser, but now it's called Axon. And if you let's look at the gun holster for a second and that little chunk of plastic that's on the front. If I've got my duty belt on and I pull my firearm out, that little sensor on the front is going to send a signal to my body camera and my dash camera and tell them to turn on so that I can be recorded. If I'm in my police car and I turn on my emergency lights, not only does it activate my dash camera, but it also activates my body camera. If I pull out my taser, the conducted energy weapon, and I turn it on, just like drawing my firearm, it's going to activate my body camera and my dash camera. And it's not only going to activate mine, but going back to the holster, if I pull my gun out, it's going to activate every body camera within a 30-meter radius that is there. And the reason this is important for transparency, we try to come up with and take advantage of everything we can that's going to turn on these electronic devices to watch the entire scene, make sure that we're getting the evidence that we need, and make sure that if the officers are doing something that they're not supposed to, they can be held accountable. And on that note, and I didn't put this on a slide, but I think it's important to mention that one of the things we did a few years ago, and to my knowledge, we were among the first agencies to do it, is we put our entire policy manual on the department's webpage. And it used to be that if you wanted to know what a department's policy manual looked like, good luck getting it, because that a lot of police departments probably still to this day, they're not going to let that out because, you know, they're afraid that you're going to call them on something. And it says right here in policy 123 that your officer was supposed to do this, but your officer didn't do that. And we said, nope, there it is. That's our policy manual. That's our rule book. If you want to go through and try to find that we did something wrong, that's fine. Call us on it. We'll try to figure it out, do something better. Maybe the situation was not exactly as you thought it was, but we want to be as transparent as possible. And we want to record as much information as we can and hold ourselves accountable. The bottom middle picture is a relatively new thing that maybe you've seen the officers using it, or maybe you will see the officers use it, but it's a new tool called the WRAP, and it's for combative prisoners that they can be kind of whole body restrained so that they can't hurt themselves, they can't flail around in the back. This is not very often used. This is, just for people that are being really, really combative. But it's a good tool to make sure that people can remain as safe as possible, not hurt themselves, not hurt officers, and get delivered to the jail in as controlled an environment as possible. And then the bottom left picture is just an inside picture of a patrol car, just because there's some cool stuff in there. But I think it's important that people understand that there's a lot of stuff going on inside a police car, and yeah, a lot of stuff that they have to pay attention to during fluid situations. We have some really cool programs, one of which was invented here. The You Have Options program was invented back in 2010, 2011, and it was born out of an observation that some people in the department had, that there were obstacles to sex assault survivors coming forward and accurately relaying to us what happened to them. And so the intention of the program is to remove those barriers and give people control of sexual assault investigations as much as possible, so that they feel comfortable coming in and telling us what happened. That's something that was created here. Some neighboring agencies have embraced it to some extent, and nationally, some agencies have embraced it. And one of the things that I really get a kick out of is that the detective from APD that was responsible for this program, she caught the attention, or the program caught the attention of a senator from New York. And when the New York Police Department, which is the biggest police department in the country, they've got over 35,000 police officers that work there. When their special victims unit, which is their sex crimes unit, just like you see Law and Order Special Victims Unit, when they wanted additional training on better ways to investigate sex assaults, the New York Police Department had an Ashland police detective come embed with them for a period of time to teach them how to do their jobs a little bit better. And that is just something that all of us should be proud of, that somebody from little old Ashland Police Department had to go all the way to New York City to show the New York police officers a better way to do their job. We participate in the Gateway program. Before Measure 110 happened, this had a little bit more relevance. Now that we're back to the point of illicit substances being criminalized, maybe it's going to be a little bit more relevant. There's two arms to this program. One is drug amnesty. And again, thinking back to before Measure 110 happened, APD had a policy that if you just wanted your heroin, meth, cocaine, whatever, if you just didn't want to have it in your life anymore, you could come to the Ashland Police Department, drop it off at the front counter. One of our record specialists or a police officer would take it and say, okay, we'll dispose of this for you. Don't want to know your name. Have a good day. Previously, if you took some heroin or cocaine into a police department and said, I don't want this in my life anymore, they'd say, okay, thanks for giving me the evidence. And by the way, you're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. And so this was, okay, we'll take it from you. You don't have to tell us your name. Just, you don't want it in your life. Have a good day. Also, and here's the second arm, if you want to come with us to Addictions Recovery Center up in Medford, we'll get you in today for a priority screening for proper placement and a treatment program. When we started this partnership, it was on track. but we switched it over to Addictions Recovery Center. And we still have this partnership, and we have had some really great success stories with it. And hopefully we can have some more success stories. Substance abuse, as we all know, is a very difficult thing to wrestle with. And even some people that try to change their lives, they get a little bit of success and then they fall back, and we'll continue to be supportive and try to encourage people to get the help that we need. We've also got a cadet program, which is mostly college age kids or youngsters, young men and women that want to look at a career in law enforcement. We've had an awful lot of new police officers come through this program, people that start off walking around Lithia Park in downtown wearing cadet uniforms. They transition into being fully sworn police officers and go on to long, successful careers. We've got Park Patrol. This is a little bit defunct right now, but in the past, we've hired people just to patrol Lithia Park, and maybe we'll get back to that point. We've got the volunteers that we talked about. And then we have, I mentioned this before, we've got concentrated area patrol. Previously, concentrated area patrol was called central area patrol, and it was just downtown. And what that program has been for a very long time, longer than I've been here, is a dedicated patrol area and a dedicated police officer to patrol that area on foot. And about 7 or 8 years ago, we realized that we needed a second CAP officer to be on foot downtown so that we could have 7-day-a-week coverage. And then about I don't think it's been quite a year, but almost a year ago, we realized that the Ashland Street business corridor out toward Weimar, Shopping Cart, Albertsons, and especially to some extent in the strip mall that is across the street from Rite Aid, that there's an awful lot of negative behavior going on out there. And so we created a secondary CAP area. So the one downtown is called CAP West, and the one out by exit 14 is called CAP East. And we assigned a third officer to that. So between these 3 officers, they try to spend an appropriate amount of time doing targeted patrols both downtown and on the Ashland Street business corridor. And what we also realized is that we wanted to have an office presence out in the new patrol area by exit 14. And the place where we were seeing the most negative behavior, and I'm not trying to be disparaging about this business. I don't know who owns the business. I'm just making a statement of fact. If could be the person that owns the business is on this call right now, I don't know. But Suds Your Duds, the laundromat, had just kind of become a really focal point for negative behavior. And so what we decided to do was take over a section, not take over like, we're coming in and claiming it as our own, but we worked with the landlord and we took over part of Suds Your Duds, just like a 300 square foot carve out, built a wall there, and we established a presence there. So now there's an Ashland police office right next door to Suds Your Duds. And I think it's really helped. The negative behavior in that immediate area has really stopped. Unfortunately, over the last 2 to 3 years, we've had 4 fatal overdoses in that immediate area. And some of them, or at least some of the non-fatal overdoses in Suds Your Duds. And we were very deliberate that that's where we wanted to plant our flag and say, we're gonna have a positive impact on the problems in this part of the city. So feel free to drive by and be absolutely underwhelmed, because it's nothing but a door with some lettering on the front of it that says Ashland Police Department. But it is an office presence that we have down there. There are several regional task forces that we have participated in from time to time. One is the Southern Oregon High-Tech Crimes Task Force. One is Southern Oregon Child Exploitation Team. Those two have some overlap. Socket deals a lot, that's Southern Oregon Child Exploitation Team. They deal a lot with, as the name says, people that are trying to take advantage of minors for, sexual exploitation. And a lot of what the Southern Oregon High-Tech Crimes Task Force does as well. There's the Medford Area Drug and Gang Enforcement Unit, MADGE. There's the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Team, and there's the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency. Previously, we had a detective embedded with the DEA for a long time. And that's a national program that DEA-led task forces around the country. They'll tap local police resources and they become task force officers. They get deputized as deputy U.S. Marshals, and they have federal authority to assist with federal investigations. Right now, we're not engaging with any of these regional task forces, although we can benefit from our partnerships with them. But as our numbers continue to get back up, we will be engaging with probably either the Southern Oregon High-Tech Crimes Task Force or the Southern Oregon Child Exploitation Team. Man, we made it all the way through. I guess Emma wants to know if you have any questions.
Perfect.